Good. We'll give it a couple of minutes and we'll get into it. Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. It's amazing technology. We could just stay connected. It's really amazing. Well, I have a suggestion. While we're waiting, instead of being connected online, why don't we connect energetically? And I'd like to recommend just a basic posture that we could hold, taking some deep breaths. So with your left hand, if you're sitting down with your left hand, let it go palm up. And with your right hand, let it go palm down. Okay? So now we're being receptive and at the same time projective. And so we can close our eyes and take some deep breaths. Relaxing any tension. Just clearing out the day so far. Feeling that universal life energy flowing through your body, flowing through your breath. Feeling that universal life energy flowing through our community, each one here. And we breathe as one. Rub your hands together. And gently just wash your face with your hands. Wash your throat and the back of your neck. Okay, excellent. Great. Well, welcome everybody. I'm so excited because this is an area where I've always kind of heard about it. Obviously, I'm a yoga practitioner of many years, but I never really felt the call to go into Ayurveda, although it was very important and is very important in a yoga practice and even in a life practice. And I met Justine many years ago at a yoga festival, and I remember her products, and I just remember her passion about Ayurveda. And we reconnected recently, and I thought, the world needs to know more about Ayurveda, especially in Finland, and she is just really great at what she does. So I wanted to introduce her to the community, pick her brain a little bit about Ayurveda so we could all learn a little bit more, get inspired, hopefully to get healthier, to be more in alignment with our true nature. Okay, so let's have her come in. Let's see if she... All right. I'm going to go ahead and invite her. Hello, Justine. Welcome.
Hey. Nice to finally be here with you and everybody that's joined in.
Yeah, well, I was going to do a quick little introduction while while your face is on the screen so we could all kind of see who you are, and then maybe you could add to it. But so you're an Ayurvedic consultant, you're an herbalist, you're a body worker, you're a mom, of course, and a business owner. Um, you originally come from Vancouver Island, if I'm correct. So we
Hmm.
discussed, and you've migrated to Finland for love, and now you're here living in Porvo. So would you like to add anything to that?
Well, it reminds me of our conversation we had a few weeks ago. I think we both moved here for love, to Finland for love. So that was really nice to reconnect with you on that.
Yeah, it's true.
And yeah, all those things that you said, it's quite busy with the being a mom and having the business and um, but I love taking care of my clients, and as you've mentioned before, I'm clearly somebody who really likes to care for people, so I've got a lot of energy to give to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I guess the first question for you is, what is Ayurveda?
So Ayurveda is an ancient traditional medicinal system from India. A lot of people are familiar with Chinese medicine, especially since the 90s. It's been like quite popular in the Western world. So there are some similarities with Chinese medicine and Ayurveda. Some would say that Ayurveda is older. I like to work with Ayurveda because it's like a lens that we can use to look at all the elements within the world and in the cosmos. So it's actually quite easy to use Ayurveda in Finland because we can just use that lens of Ayurveda to see if something, for example, is it cold? Is it hot? Is it dry? Is it wet? So looking at those elements through that lens. And, in Finland, we have very cold and very dry. Those two elements are quite strong, especially for about 6 months of that autumn winter.
Hmm.
So we're really looking at trying to do the opposite with Ayurveda. Ayurveda is always about opposites. So what
Oh,
would you do if you're cold and you're dry? You would want to warm that up and moisten it up, right?
mhm.
So it can be that simple. Looking at Ayurveda with the lens at these elements and looking at the seasons you're living in and the climate that you're living in.
Okay. So, well, that makes it simple. I mean, basically, it's trying to live in harmony, I would imagine, the best that you can, yes?
Exactly. It's about finding balance between the elements.
And so, what are some of the, I guess, what are some of the categories to Ayurveda? Is it just eating, or is there other things?
Eating is a big part, and I think that's one of the first things that people think of. And I think people often think Ayurveda is really strict diet. But in my practice, I don't go too strict in the diet. It's more about how we're eating. Is the food wet? Is it dry? Is it warm? Is it raw? I'm looking more at those things rather than no bananas, no berries, for example, like some Ayurvedic doctors will say. So that food is a part of it, and we're all thinking of that when we think of the word Ayurveda. I thought a lot of people think of beauty too, because there's a lot of, especially beauty ads and marketing around Ayurveda. And of course, beauty plays a role in it. But traditionally, it's really like a medicinal system about living in harmony with nature and living according to the season. So it's actually also about locality and eating local. So a lot of people think, it needs to be only imported foods from India, only Indian foods and Indian spices and medicinal products. But the true ancient texts of Ayurveda talk about eating what is local. So that's how my Nordic Ayurveda is quite different from if you went to see an Indian doctor, for example. You're going to get quite a different view and recommendations there.
Yeah, so it's based on, obviously if it originates in the Indian area, it's going to be based on those climates, those foods, those herbs, all those things. And so, but the system of Ayurveda is not just inclusive or exclusive to India. You could put it anywhere, right? So you're living off the land and with the land, yeah?
Exactly. So that's why, people often ask, well, why do you work with Ayurveda? Because, you live in Finland and you're from Canada. And I get it. From first glance, it doesn't quite make sense. But like I said, you can use the Ayurvedic lens to look at all the elements and the balance of them. You can local foods based on, are they cold, are they dry, are they hot, for each individual person. Like I said, you don't have to eat only those Indian foods. For example, let's talk about herbs, because we have lots of really nice Finnish wild plants. I really like to work with the Finnish wild plants as much as possible, and they're really great for people as far as after the long winter, the body's really congested. In the springtime, we eat those wild greens and they help cleanse our body. They basically help squeeze out the wet towel, like of our body, all that lymphatic system, getting things moving and out. So our Finnish wild plants are super great for that. But for example, if somebody has really chronic disease of 10 years or more, for example, sometimes some of the Finnish herbs and plants might not be as effective for something as chronic. So then we can look at some of these more Eastern herbs and roots and see what we can work with there. Maybe there's going to be something more potent and stronger for that specific ailment. So that's why I really like to have that Ayurvedic background and basis and use some of those herbs there, so that when maybe the Finnish plants aren't going to work out, we have another direction we can go in.
Right. So you have, so what I'm getting is working with food to help you stay in harmony, working with herbs, obviously, to help you stay in harmony. So is yoga also a part of Ayurveda? Is that also a tool that's used in
Yeah,
Ayurveda?
that's a really good question. So we could have even have started there, because that's so simple. Is yoga and Ayurveda are really one. They're in union together. And unfortunately, in the West, we kind of don't practice the Ayurvedic aspect of yoga. We do more pranayama, breathing, meditation, physical asana, but we haven't really implemented Ayurveda. And I'm not sure quite why that is. Maybe as Westerners, we love being like physically active and moving. That's maybe the first thing we're drawn to.
Mm.
Um, and maybe like I said, we think of the foods, or maybe they're going to be foreign and weird. Maybe they don't really suit the climate we're living in. So that's maybe why it hasn't been integrated so well. But I feel like that's where my strength is I'm very good at being able to see what works here from the Ayurvedic perspective, and some of the things that maybe don't. There's a lot of medicines from there that I just don't work with. They just don't really suit the climate here or what the people's needs are here that much. So for example, we also live in quite high stress society, where traditionally in India it was much more calm and relaxed. There was time to meditate in the cave. We're not really doing that here now so much. So we have to sort of look at that lens with what works here and what doesn't.
Now, I'd like to dig into the yoga a little bit, because how would you say looking at yoga through an Ayurvedic lens differs? Can you dig into that a little bit more? Can you give us an example?
Yeah, an example would be the yoga class that I teach on Tuesday mornings in Porvo is called seasonal yoga. It's technically Ayurvedic yoga, but I call it seasonal because people maybe understand what that is more. It's a little easier approach. So because it's Ayurvedic yoga, we change pranayama and asana according to the seasons. So there are certain postures, the asanas, that would be more suitable for wintertime, for example.
Ooh.
Yeah, like grounding poses. We want to get grounded in the winter, because winter is all about the air and ether around us. It's very light. So we need to go opposite. We got to hibernate like the bear, right? We should be all hibernating like bears right now. But we're definitely not. We got the lights on and we're busy doing things. But the more that we can have in our physical asana practice, a grounding practice, the more balancing that will be for us during this really long winter season. We would call it Vata season, because that's related to the air, wind, cold, light elements of what winter and autumn are.
Hmm. Well, that's cool. So, like, you're working the different asana and practices to complement the different seasons, to not disturb or work against what's happening at the moment. Oh, that's I didn't even know that you would do that. That's really cool. Wow. And what about like the summer? What would you do in the summer?
So summer I take the class out to the park, so we're actually there under the sun and in the element, which is really nice, down by the river here in Porvo. And the poses, they should be more cooling. So instead of sun salutations, for example, we would do cooling moon salutations. And we would not do a lot of twisting because twisting is really warming up the internal organs. That would be more for winter poses. And the practice, like the eyes should be a little less determined, so a little softer. You know, when you're in the warrior pose looking over fingers, the eyes should be soft and not so like driven, like, yes, I'm going to master this pose. Yeah, so I encourage everybody, just look at the nature, look at the trees, soften your poses. I don't correct people during the summer. I'm like, just go with the flow and soften it up a bit.
Right, because the summer's intense,
Yeah,
so you want to counter
exactly.
that. Cool.
Exactly.
Oh, that's good to know. All right, so so far you could say that Ayurveda consists of food, herbs, yoga. Is there anything else? Is there any meditation or studying or anything like that?
Yeah, it encompasses so much. I mean, I feel like I can see Ayurveda in everything because the three doshas, which are Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, they encompass different elements. And I can see the elements in all of nature, a rock, water, a flower, a tree. So it really, Ayurveda is in everything. It's very hard for me to turn off the Ayurvedic lens,
Yeah.
you know, on all the time. So it is really part of the food, the lifestyle, the yoga. It's just living. Living is Ayurveda. It is the science of life. The literal translation is the science of life. So
Hmm. Are there any strong no's in Ayurveda? Is there anything that is like absolutely a human being should not do?
there are a lot of no's. That is true. And I think people think of that and get turned off about Ayurveda. But I'm really more of a yes person in Ayurveda. I don't go so hardcore into the no's. I'm going to give suggestions that are going to be more positive. So, for example, I would say if somebody is drinking excessive amounts of coffee, I'm going to try to get them to reduce it. But I'm not necessarily going to be like, you can never have coffee again, because then people will get turned off by Ayurveda. You know, everyone in Finland loves coffee. So for me to just tell everyone not to have coffee, then it goes around as gossip. Oh, Ayurveda is all about quitting coffee and not eating sugar, and So
Right.
anything in excess is not really recommended for Ayurveda. You know, it tends to be more of a natural, softer approach. So if there's anything excessive, tobacco, drugs, alcohol, sugar, coffee, of course, we're going to try to reduce those things. But yeah, some Ayurvedic doctors can go pretty strict, like no coffee, no caffeine, no sugar. They'll even say no berries for Finns at all because they don't maybe understand the difference between the berries. They just kind of classify all Finnish berries as being the same and that they're too heating and too sour for a lot of Finns. But for example, blueberries are actually cooling. So that would be a berry we could recommend for someone that has too much body heat. So
Wow.
just saying all no to berries, like telling Finnish people no berries, that doesn't work, right? So that's why we need to look more critically through this Nordic way, through Ayurveda.
Well, I mean, to me, it seems like Ayurveda is all about coming into balance with life, and if there's too much, if you're too heavy on the nose or heavy on the yes, something's out of whack, something's out of balance. So even in the approach to Ayurveda, there needs to be Ayurveda, if that makes sense.
Exactly. So I am maybe a little more casual and relaxed about it than some other practitioners, which maybe you noticed we had consultation together. I work pretty differently, I think, than others do.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously, if something is super chronic, then you're gonna have to cut some things out of your
Yeah,
life that's creating the chronicness. But I hear you. Eventually, it becomes a little bit more of a balancing act instead of these hard turns, so to speak. What about sex in Ayurveda? Is there any kind of approach to sex in that sense?
yeah. Actually, I have written a book, and each season talks about sex, about the sort of appropriate amounts, kind of not so much in detail about the types, but sort of like what your body's stamina is like in that season and what how much you can sort of handle at that time, because it does, when you do have orgasm, it does deplete ojas, and ojas is like our vital essence. So if you're constantly depleting that, it can actually like deplete your body.
For
So,
men, you're saying,
and women
and
too.
women.
Yeah,
Okay.
can. And I would say definitely more so for men because there's more fluids happening there. So it can be more depleting. Um, but for example, in we don't get so much heat waves here, but if we do have like a heat wave, it wouldn't be good to be like having excessive amounts of sex, because then you're overheat, like the body gets quite hot during that time, right? So you're really overexerting and overheating the body. It kind of correlates in with exercise with Ayurveda. I would say the sex and the exercise. So you have to kind of look at the quality of both of them. Is it a heating type or is it more cooling? What season are you in? Like when it's a heat wave, you shouldn't go for a really long run in the middle of the hottest part of the day, right? That would be like too overheating for the body and too excessive. And you could actually disturb pitta dosha, which is the fire element. So you're going to throw that fire element even more out of balance during the fire season.
And so in the winter, just for example, with sex, or exercise, however you want to dice it, but during the winter, it would be recommended to have really fiery sex.
Yeah, it's more so. So I guess in Finland, for that like 6 months, we would be able to endure more because it's going to bring more heat to us. And of course, we have to look at each individual. Like if somebody has a lot of air element, they're more directed towards vata, which is a light and airiness. Their stamina is going to be less. Where somebody that has a lot of water and earth qualities, which is quite heavy, they're going to have a lot of stamina. So they're going to be able to let go a lot and like again and again. So we have to look at each individual within the seasons as well.
Wow.
That's like with anything with Ayurveda, it's individual and it's seasonal. So that's why when people come for consultation, I really like to give them like a seasonal plan. Like, let's do this during this season. Let's change it up for this one, an example, which I think is quite uncommon in consultations. They're usually more like very doshic specific, like you are fire element. You can only do things for fire element people. It's quite black and white, and it doesn't maybe start changing things with the seasons, which I think is important. Especially in Finland, we have like a 6 month season. It's like a one season, of that autumn, winter, vata season. So
Interesting. Yeah, no, I could see how when you said earlier that you could really put the lens of Ayurveda on everything and use that as a tool to really feel like you're in harmony, like you're in balance, like you're doing what you can to make your life as joyful as possible, so to speak. Okay. Um, let's see if I have any other questions. I thought those were. I don't know. Do you have anything you want to add? Anything you
I
want to jump
talk
on?
about Ayurveda for hours. So yeah, it depends what direction you want to go into. I can also talk about herbalism forever, and because that's, really my passion is my background is herbalism. And I think that's also kind of uncommon with consultants. They're kind of more trained in this medical way, and then they learn about some herbs, maybe like a short course on herbs, and they maybe will recommend like tablets or pills often, which I avoid. I do so much like capsules and tablets and pills and things. I really like to do things with food medicine, and I really like to work with like whole plants, like eating the wild plants here in the spring and then drying those and then using them for the rest of the year, making oils, making vinegars, tinctures like that.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
All right. So um, I could stick with the food a little bit and herbs and stuff like that. So is there any specific recommendation for eating from
Yeah.
Ayurveda?
So let's go kind of like general,
I
not quite as individual because that's kind of hard to do when everybody's different. But let's generalize a little bit. So generalizing with food would be, um, for one, processed food would be kind of one of those big no's in Ayurveda. We really like fresh food because food that's fresh has prana, it has life force. You can call it chi, prana. It has that, vital energy which builds our ojas. Ojas is that word I used earlier, which is like your stamina, your vitality, like your glow, your skin, your hair and everything. It shows your ojas. So yeah, the fresh food gives that prana. So if you're eating a lot of boxed food and a lot of processed food, it doesn't have any prana in it. There's nothing left there. Um, so trying to focus on those pranic foods. And that's where we get into this word sattva and sattvic foods, which are considered more like pure foods. So there's that category of foods would be like fresh fruits. Fresh fruits are considered sattvic.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
or like microwaved food or ready-made food but processed would be more tamasic because it's like really heavy in nature. It's very hard to digest. It really clogs up the channels in the body. And then rajasic food would be like really spicy food and like really food that gets the blood moving and gets movement going. And herbs can be like that too. They can be really rajasic. And so you don't want to have too much tamasic or too much rajasic food because that would throw you out of balance. You want to have a lot of food with prana that's in that sattvic category, that's like pure, fresh foods.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about Finland because the growing season here is so short. So, and then you have October, November, end of the cucumber season, no more strawberries. You might have some cabbage, still left, potatoes. You know,
It's
what do you
definitely
eat?
challenging here, more challenging for sure. But Europeans, they learned how to pickle and ferment their vegetables, can them. Even like Ayurvedic kind of has a thing about too much frozen food, and it's the category with that is more just that it doesn't have the as same amount of prana as unfrozen food. But of course, we're going to freeze our berries in Finland, and we're going to eat those throughout the winter. That's like an obvious thing that we're going to do. We're still going to get prana through it, but there's not as much prana as the fresh ones in the summer, of course. And this um, this skill of pickling and fermenting and canning foods is really good because we actually need that sort of cooked process of fermented foods in the autumn and winter for our gut and for our stomach. So it actually is very Ayurvedic in the cold months to eat the fermented foods at that time. So you see, Mother Nature knows, kind of like we're not going against nature. We're actually just very much going with the flow and not even realizing sometimes that we are following Ayurveda and eating in an Ayurvedic way.
And and rye breads and all the breads that the Finns have, used for survival for probably hundreds of years. Um, what kind of prana comes in those breads? Is there still prana in that bread?
Yes. So if you can do like a wild yeast, then it would have the prana in the wild yeast because that's alive. So we can get into gluten a little bit here. So, for example, I don't really have so much of an issue with gluten when I'm working with my clients. Some are maybe gluten intolerant, and that's a real issue. But a lot of people are just avoiding gluten these days because they just feel better when they don't eat it. But I've usually ask them, well, have you actually tried just having bread without the yeast? Because usually it's the bread that's giving people problems. And then they think they need to eat like all gluten free. But it's because they open these packages of yeast, like commercial yeast, and pour it into the bread dough. That is the problem because there's no prana in that yeast.
Right.
It's dead yeast, basically, in a sense. It's not like alive. So we have a very hard time digesting that. And that's usually why bread gets a bad rap. It's more the commercial yeast than the actual other ingredients in the bread.
Like the natural fermentation process that would happen if you left the dough out for a few days and how like the atmosphere works with it and creates that
Yes.
fermentation, right?
And a good sourdough, for example. So that's often like a lot of wheat, like white wheat, but you have that fermentation there to help you break down the white weight of the gluten there. And then we can get a little more specific about it. Like we have those three doshas that we're talking about again. And somebody who has a lot of water and earth quality in their individual constitution, they might have a harder time with gluten and digesting and breaking down even that sourdough fermented bread because they're so earthy already, and bread, white bread is very earthy. But for somebody
Right.
that has a lot of that air quality in their constitution, they need that grounding from that dough. That dough like brings them down to the earth. Like, have you ever been really, really stressed and then you have that kind of stress eating and you go for carbs, right? Usually it's like carbs that people want because they're trying to ground
Right.
themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, because that opened up something. So if a person looks in the mirror at home after this conversation, what are some of the characteristics of the doshas that a person could look for to kind of get an idea of what they are?
Yeah, that's a good question because a lot of people think that you can sort of judge what the dosha balance is by looking at a person. And of course, there is these kind of general things. Um, so the air element of vata would be generally a smaller frame and more thin, where you can see bones more easily. Um, so more slender and tall, or short and slender. Not so developed, not as big muscles, and maybe the hair isn't as thick and as luxurious. Um, Maybe the person is obviously like quite a daydreamer, very creative person. Those would be like very stereotypical examples of vata, which is the air and wind element that has a cold quality to it as well. And then pitta would be the fire element that's related to a more sporty kind of body type, more driven type of person. Um, some say more likely to go bald, like men to have the male pattern baldness. Eyes. So the eyes are the seat of pitta. So often when pitta is too high, it burns through the eyes faster and you have to get eyeglasses at a younger age.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a common thing that pitta is too high or out of balance as to why the eyeglasses are needed. As we get older, it's a little bit more complicated, but if you're younger and you need glasses, there's definitely some issue with pitta there, the fire element.
Okay.
And, and kapha would be more of a full body, very luxurious hair, big eyes, calm, grounded kind of person. One of the best people to have like as a partner or a best friend, like because of their kindness and groundedness and calm. Yeah, but they often don't feel so comfortable in their body because they're naturally more full bodied.
Now, another question that's arising is like, let's say a person is pitta and they're in a very cold environment. Will they naturally turn up more fire to try to, or would they turn down their fire to try to blend into their environment? Could that cause a problem where you live?
So I always ask my clients where they were born and where they grew up because climate plays a big role. Because I want to see if especially if they have diseases, are their diseases coming from where they've been living, or is it ancestral? Because we also have a lot of inheritance from our DNA, or is it just purely their birth constitution, the balance of how they were born? So the seasons and the climate do play a role, definitely. But for example, somebody who lives in Finland, if their um, birth constitution is predominantly pitta, which is the fire element, they're going to thrive a lot more easily in Finland. They're not probably going to be as affected by the cold. They maybe necessarily don't need to wear gloves as early as other people would. They can still do things outside with their hands. Maybe don't get so irritated by being out in the cold. So it's
Wow.
kind of where they can thrive better. Where somebody whose birth constitution is vata, which is the air and wind element, they are going to have a harder time here in those cold months. It's just the season against their own constitution, like walling up to each other.
So you're saying like, so opposites could actually be a good thing for your dosha.
Well, I would say, yeah, in that regard, that if you have a lot of air and wind element, you're probably going to thrive better in a place that's warmer, and vice versa. Yeah.
Cool.
But when we're talking about these characteristics that I was really stereotyping there, it is really hard to tell just by looking at somebody. If you haven't studied Ayurveda, just because someone's thin doesn't mean that Vata is,
Of course, of
yeah.
course.
Myself, for an example. So um, I have pretty thick hair and like full face, and I would say like average body type. But my hands and my feet are very bony, very, very thin and long and bony. So I would say my body type and sort of skin and hair type looks more like Pitta Kapha, but you can see the Vata in my hands and my feet. And Vata is my dominant as far as my birth constitution, which is the air and the wind element. But you would never know just by looking at me on the street. You'd have
Right.
to like pay attention to my hands and feet.
Cool.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
that's
why
good.
the pulse reading is very important. So the pulse does not lie. That's where you can feel the Vata, the air and wind element, as the dominant, not by looking at me.
What are you feeling? Are you just sensing the element in the pulse, or is there a certain thing that you pick up that goes, all right, that's Vata or that's Pitta?
Yeah, the pulse can have 7 to 9 layers depending on who the teacher is or what your school of training is. And the layers of the pulse, um, let's keep it simple because it's pretty complicated. But if we keep it simple with the pulse, we'll go as simple as we're looking for birth constitution in the pulse. So what the dominant dosha is from the day you were born. And the Vata pulse is going to feel kind of more like a snake. So it actually has like this animalistic character to it. So like snaky.
Like,
Yeah, that was almost like too fluid when you did it. It's a little more like really shaky, kind of slithery. Yeah.
cool.
Pitta, the fire element, would be more like a frog, like a pumping, jumping frog. And the kapha pulse, which is the water and earth element, that is actually really soft and beautiful. It's like a swan bobbing on the water. And that one's actually much harder to feel. Some consultants who aren't very good at pulse reading can't really find it. So that can be a bit of an issue. I love to feel it. It's like my favorite pulse to feel because it's like so calm and relaxed. Very, very lovely. But yeah, that would be like a very simple way to describe the superficial pulse of where we just check to see what the birth constitution is. And then from there, we can look more into diseases and if there's a imbalance of other doshas. So for example, I like to kind of describe it as other doshas being a boss. Like Vata, the air element, might be from birth, but Pitta, fire, is like trying to be boss. And it's, it's not your natural balance, but it's coming in and trying to take over. And that's when some diseases can arise. So that's why the pulse is important and not the online quizzes, because the online quizzes are super confusing. They don't differentiate between what is your birth constitution and what is a current imbalance. Where the pulse reading in the consultation, we can see what is from the birth and then what is a possible imbalance.
Right. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, it's a world of different having your fingers or hands on somebody. You could really feel, what's really going on. But, and then I know that you do also tongue reading. Could you talk about the importance of tongue reading in Ayurveda and why you would read the tongue and what you're looking for?
Yeah, the tongue is like a map. It shows what's happening inside the body. So especially the organs, we can really see the organ function there. If there's some blockage in an organ, or I can see if there's too much heat in the blood. Sometimes I can see the mineral balance, like maybe if there's a lot of magnesium lacking there. We can see if like the lungs are having sort of a difficulty. So it's a good prevention tool. I really like looking at the tongue. And especially if you have some ancestral issues,
Mm.
like through DNA, some diseases there, I can kind of check at the tongue and say, oh yeah, like it looks like maybe we should be a little cautious of that same lung issue that your dad had, or that heart issue that your mom had, or something. So really good diagnostic tool there, by looking at the tongue.
And so, just for everybody at home or whoever looks at this, because I always like to give a little tips and tools and stuff so people can get better on their own. If we put our tongue out in the morning, what are some of the things that if we see, we should kind of, I know this is being, again, there's a whole science to reading the tongue, but can you give us a little, like, if you see this on your tongue, you might want to stop that, or you might want to, you're out of balance or something like that. Is anything coming to your mind?
Yeah, it's actually really healthy to look at your tongue every day. That would be a good thing for people to start doing. It will make my job easier because then you will be able to actually notice your tongue changing throughout the day, and hopefully start to make some of your own changes there for your own health. Because, for example, if you drink a lot of alcohol or eat a lot of sugar, you're probably going to notice the next day that you have a lot of little red dots like all over the tongue. You might have them every day, and that could be from other things. It could be from medications as well. But if it's something you don't usually have, you only have it after alcohol and sugar, you can see how it's heating your blood up. It's basically like boiling blood. So you'll see that and you'll be like, okay, I should probably stop doing that, because every time I eat all that candy, that whole bag of candy, or go out binge drinking, the next day the tongue, shows that immediately. So that would be an example. Um, if you have a lot of deep cracks on the tongue, there are some issues there. It can be it's a whole soup pot of what that could mean. And that needs to be looked at more specifically by me, like where are the cracks, how deep are they, what are they looking like there. But that is a sign that there's definitely some deep issues that we need to look at there. There's a lot of tongue cracks. The back of the tongue tends to be where most of the ama is, which is this white or yellow sticky stuff. I've even seen green or brown. So if it's green or brown, please come and see me. We really need to. If it's regularly, like, obviously if you ate something brown, your tongue is brown that day. But if it's brown every day, there's definitely some issue there. But like having some white or some yellow is on a little bit of a normal level. Everybody has some. But the less ama we have on the tongue, the less ama we have in our body. And ama is undigested byproduct of emotions or food. So anything that we're not processing is going to build up in our body like this sticky white substance. And it likes to lodge into areas of the body where we're weak. So for somebody that has arthritis, your ama goes to your joints. For someone that has ama or asthma, it's going to the lungs. So we want to remove ama from the body. And cleaning the tongue in the morning with one of those like copper tongue cleaners is a really good way to get it off, because it naturally detoxes out of your tongue while you're sleeping. Like it's trying to get out. It doesn't want to be there. So clean it before you drink the morning water to get that ama off. And
That's
like
great.
one can have a little bit, but if your whole tongue is coated with it, again, come and see me. There's some big issues there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that brings us up to like what we plan on having March 10th here at the Helsinki Healing Arts Center is you're going to
Exactly.
do an Ayurveda detox workshop. You're going to teach us how to detoxify yourself through the lens of Ayurveda, through the science of Ayurveda, and through also your products, which are fantastic. The ghee is amazing. I'm yet to take the herbal ghee for the detox because I'm going to do that with my wife. But yeah, no, this is great. You want to talk a little bit about what your plan is for March 10th for the detox? And if anybody's interested, I'll put information down below. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the detox is something that I've personally done over 20 times. It's not my own making. It's an old traditional cleansing system that I have learned from my teacher. And you're taking herbal ghee. So it's kirkastetuvoi in Finnish, or clarified butter in English. and that has herbs cooked inside. And then you're going to drink that for some nights. And then you're going to take a special oil on the last night to really flush everything out. So it's a cleanse that works on removing fat soluble toxins, because a lot of the toxins get stored in our fat tissues. So doing a juice cleanse, for example, would be more working on the water soluble toxins, which are much easier to eliminate. So we want to really get into those deep fat tissues where a lot of the toxins have become hard and are stored. The ghee loosens them up, loosens those fat toxins up so that we can flush it out with the oil at the end.
Cool. Very cool. And you'll give us recipes and what else? What else is in the package, so to speak?
Yeah. So just recipe suggestions. You don't have to do really strict diet with it. It's a zero hunger diet, so no fear. You're not going to be like starving. You might want to eat vegetarian during that time because you are drinking a lot of fat in the evening, so you probably won't be craving a lot of meat during that time and fats. And yeah, I have recipe suggestions, but I would say vegetarian, lots of fresh food with prana would be the most important. So you choose what it is for you. That would, like, it's more important that you do it even if the food's not perfect. So I'm not like too strict on people about the food, but like I said, lots of pranic food would be good, fresh foods. And yeah, we're going to talk about the recipes, also lifestyle during that time, sort of some massages and things. We can show a little self massage that you can do, or maybe that your partner can do for you, or if you can go for professional massage or get some body work done from Kuldeep, that would be awesome. That would be like, bonus on top of it, but not completely necessary. So like I said, it's just important to do it even if it's not perfect. Maybe you didn't eat as well as you wanted, or maybe you didn't get to see somebody for a massage. It's still going to be very, very good cleansing program.
And I have to say, now that we're in this kind of new, you want to call it an age or an era, there's such a need for community. There's such a need to not feel alone and to kind of hold each other up as a brother and sisterhood, as a family, human family. And this is why I think, detoxes as a community are so important, because you're not alone. There's other people going through it, and you might meet new friends, and you might get inspired to change your life in a new direction. And this is kind of why we're putting this together here. And we have Justine, leading us through the Ayurveda world, which I really appreciate. And I really appreciate, that you're here helping people get healthy and happy.
Thank you. I'm really glad that you mentioned the community part, because that's exactly true. I went through it so many times by myself, and I really like to do it, at the same time as my clients are doing it as well. And I'm also available for support during it. So if you want to send me a message, I will answer any questions. Even if it's on the weekend, I answer, because I know what it's like to go through it alone, and I don't want that for other people.
Yeah, and I'm going to do it with my wife, and I think it's fun. You kind of have some kind of common goal together. You could do it with your best friend. You could do it with your brother or sister. You could do it with your parents if they're open to it. And it could be a really great way to just, I don't know, reset relationships, reset your body, reset your mind, and move forward in a new way. So, all right. I mean, anything else, Justine? What do you feel? You're okay?
Yeah, I'm good. I think we covered a lot. I really hope that everybody learned a lot through our chat, and I really appreciate you introducing me to your folks there through your Helsinki Healing Arts, and I'm really excited to have these classes coming up in the spring.
Yeah, cool. Me too. And we're going to do another live towards the end of February, just to kind of, go over some things we might have missed, or if we get inspired to talk about things, we'll touch on those before the detox. All right?
Okay. My daughter's peeking in there.
Hey, cool. Hello. Oh, that was awesome. What a cool way to end it.
It's so good time. Just peek again.
Take care, Justine. God bless you. All the best.
Okay.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Bye bye.
Ciao, ciao. Take care, Justine.
Yeah, you too.
All right.
Bye.